Is there anyone who would like to come up for a story this Now, you may recall that, I think it was about 3, maybe 4 weeks ago, I said the story was so big that I needed you actually to kind of be around the front, because this is another one of those stories that's going to spread way up. So, Catherine and Megan, if you could just switch around that way a bit so that we have lots of room.
Yeah.
That's good. That's nice and big. So, this is a brand new. It's not a brand new story. It's an old story, sort of, but it's a brand new story to me. And when I found it, I loved it, and I wanted to share it with you. And so, this story doesn't begin where a lot of them began. Okay, I just need you to kind of give me some space. This story happens in a land that was beautiful. It was a beautiful land with lots of rich soil for growing things, with lots of great lakes, and it was filled with wonderful people. And the people that led this land were a queen and a king. They were a queen and a king. And they led all of the people of this land with love and, okay, I just need you to kind of sit back. I know you're excited, but it will all come out eventually. And with love and fairness and care. And in this land, they were never at war, and there were never any poor people or anyone that was hungry. Imagine, nobody was hungry. Everyone in this land had what they needed, but not too much. They had just what they needed. And all of the people were very happy. But the king and the queen were getting old. And they knew that they had to find someone to take over for them, to rule this land. And so they put up a sign. Wanted. A new king and queen must be strong, firm, fair, wise, and kind. And they put these signs up all over the land. And they received lots and lots of applications. Lots of applications. Lots of people wanted to be king and queen. And they finally narrowed it down to 3 couples. The first one was Bart and Beth. Bart and Beth. And Bart and Beth were strong and loyal and just and brave. And many times in their life, they had helped the army make peace. And then there was Mary and George. Mary and George were honest, loyal, and reliable. And they had been king and queen in another land. And then there was Aneda and Bonwa. Aneda and Bonwa were noble and true and caring, and they came with really good references. Well, the king looked at these three couples and said, they're all really good leaders. This is hard to decide. We need to have a test. And so the three couples came to the castle, and each were handed a loaf of fresh bread. They were handed a loaf of fresh bread, and it was still warm and crusty and delicious. And the queen said to the three couples, "You must care for this loaf just the way that you would care for the whole land. And we want you all to return tomorrow, and we'll see how you've done." So, Bart and Beth said, "This test is so easy it makes me laugh." And so they put their loaf into a sack, and they got on their horses, and they galloped off. And just to be sure they could protect the bread, they had their swords ready. Well, they didn't need their swords, because the only people they passed as they galloped across the land were an old beggar, a very, very poor man, and a woman with a small child that was crying. That's the only people they passed. And they knew that they weren't going to be any trouble, so they just galloped right by. Well, Mary and George, because they had been king and queen before, they had experience with this kind of thing. And they knew that fresh bread was tempting for people. And that when people were hungry, they would do just about anything to get that bread. So what they did, they went home and they put the bread in a heavy vault, and they put chains and padlocks on it. In fact, they put 16 padlocks and 50 heavy chains around that vault so that nobody would be able to get the bread. And then they stayed awake all night guarding the vault. Well, the beggar that the first couple had seen was walking by and could smell the bread even through the vault. Could smell that bread. And he was hungry. And he begged for some of the bread. But Mary and George were firm. They said, "No, can't have any." And so he moved on. And then the woman with a small child, and the child was crying because the child was hungry, came by. They also smelt the bread and asked for some. Mary and George said, "No, we're protecting this bread. You can't have any." And so they moved on. Well, the third couple, Aneda and Bonwa, they put their bread in a basket. And they left the castle and they started heading down the road. And as they headed down the road, they saw this beggar coming towards them. And they thought, "He looks really hungry." And the beggar, when he got to them and saw that they had bread, said, "It smells so delicious, may I have some?" Well, Aneda and Bonwa were really not sure what to do. the king and queen wouldn't want anyone to go hungry, they thought, because this king and queen never let anybody go hungry, but they were supposed to protect the bread. But they decided they had to give him some bread. Even though they might fail the test, they had to give him some bread. And so they broke off some, and they gave it to the beggar. And he was very thankful. Well, they got a little bit further down the road, and that woman with the young child, and the child was now really crying because the child was really hungry. And Aneda just could not say no. She gave them some bread as well. And the further they went along, they kept meeting people who were hungry. And so everywhere they met someone who was hungry, they gave them some bread. And it wasn't long before their whole basket was empty. So, the next morning, Aneda and Bonwa headed back to the castle with their empty basket, and they were sad because they were sure that they had lost the test. And as they were heading there, Bart and Beth came galloping past them with their bread securely in their bag. And when they saw that their basket was empty, they laughed and said, "Ha, they've lost, we've won because we still have our bread." And they got back to the castle. In the same way, Mary and George dragged and pushed their heavy vault all the way back to the castle. And when they passed the empty basket, they also said, "Ah, they've definitely lost. We've won because our bread is safe." So when Aneda and Bonwa saw the queen and the king, they said, "We are so sorry, but we could not bring your bread back. It's all gone. We met hungry people, and we fed them, and there's nothing left." And the queen and the king said, "You have passed the test." Aneda and Bonwa have passed the test. Because when you cared for that woman and child, that woman was actually the queen disguised. She went out and pretended to be a poor woman with a child. And the king went out and pretended to be the beggar. And he said, when you passed by to these people, when you passed by, you were passing by us. You cared for the bread, Aneda and Bonwa, as you need to care for the land. You cared more for the people than passing the test. And so, you are the new king and queen. Well, Bart and Beth and George and Mary left angry. They were very angry because they didn't understand why they didn't win. But everyone else in this whole land lived happily ever after. I wonder how the king and queen felt when Aneda and Bonwa came back with the empty basket. I wonder how they felt. Oh, and Aneda and Bonwa thought, yeah. Simone? Yeah. We may not win, but we helped other people, and that's what's important. Helping people is more important than winning a test. Yeah, that's a really, really good way to put it, Kathy. Well, that's our story. Now, normally we would send you off right away, but we want to do something.